You're listening to MedX, the Medical Extrusion Podcast, presented by US Extruders. Extrude with confidence, custom extrusion equipment designed for you and your application.
Hey, Noel, thanks for joining the MedX podcast.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Very interested in learning more about electrospinning for cardiovascular applications today. Certainly a topic that I'm not real familiar with, and I know our audience will be enthusiastic to learn about it as well. But before we do that, I'd like you to kind of give your background about yourself and VIVOLTA, a snapshot of VIVOLTA, and then after that, talk a little bit about the medtech ecosystem in the Netherlands and Europe as well.
Sure thing. Happy to do so. Right. So my name is Noel Davison. I'm the Director of Business Development here at VIVOLTA. We're based here in the Netherlands, outside of Eindhoven, in a little town called Valra. And just a bit about me. Yeah, I'm, as you can probably hear, I'm not Dutch. I'm American by birth. Grew up in the US, but about 15 years ago, moved to the Netherlands for a cool opportunity to do a PhD over here while working in a small company at that time, small orthobiologics company that's now become a big company by the name of Curos. And it was a super opportunity, quite unique in Europe, to be able to do a PhD inside a startup or inside a true company. And of course, there was an affiliation with the University of Twente in the east of the Netherlands. So I completed the PhD, and as luck in life would have it, met my wife in the last year of the PhD, and 15 years later, I'm still here. So funny the way that life unfolds in front of you in unforeseen ways.
Great story.
VIVOLTA is a scale up actually at this phase, but with longer history going back to 2008. In 2008, the company was founded under the name IME, and back in those days, the company existed as an R&D electrospinning equipment designer and manufacturer. And so from 2008 till 2020, IME sold hundreds of machines worldwide, primarily to academic institutes, but also medical device manufacturers. And in 2020, basically evolved our strategy into a contract development manufacturing organization and rebranded into VIVOLTA. And why that's significant for us is it now allows us to serve medical device manufacturers by bringing more value, not just our best-in-class electrospinning equipment, but actually helping them co-develop new medical devices, new medical implants, utilizing electrospinning, electrospun components, and then perform the contract manufacturing for them so that they can reach their target markets in the scale that they require. So we're very excited to be in this new frontier as a CDMO, and we're happy to fulfill an unmet need which exists to actually be able to scalably manufacture electrospun medical products, which we believe here to now has not been addressed by any of the other vendors.
That's interesting. Did you say that you kind of started as an equipment supplier solution for electrospinning and then transitioned to a CDMO?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And you've seen that, you've seen the analogs to that, I think, in other sectors of medical device manufacturing, especially I think in the coatings industry. You've seen companies that have specialized in coatings equipment, but then forward integrating into components and services, contract manufacturing. And I think it makes sense because, of course, nowadays with medtech companies becoming larger and larger, the capacity for them to do internal R&D is continues to be, I think, pressurized by the drive for profits, of course, and other factors. So when they can outsource development or partner with specialists to catalyze their development, it's quite attractive for them. And then the next level, obviously, the contract manufacturing, we're able to supply those components so that they don't need to make huge capital investments internally, and they can rely on a trusted vendor to integrate in their supply chain. So no, for us, it was a natural evolution. We still really utilize and are grounded by that fundamental technology of being able to design our own electrospinning equipment. We still utilize that every day because that's what allowed us to pioneer our our fully automated electrospinning production systems, which no other parties have. That part of being an equipment designer manufacturer remains a core part of our DNA today.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, so let's talk about the medtech ecosystem in the Netherlands and Europe in general, and if you can touch a little bit on MDR, that would be great.
I'll do my best. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time to be a part of medtech in Europe. Of course, the global market continues to be driven by the US, but I think it's important to recognize there's a lot of tremendous innovation happening here in Europe. And specifically here in the Netherlands, we're very thankful to be based here because the Dutch government continues to strongly support startups and scale-ups like ours, small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly innovative companies in the healthcare medtech sector. So even just last year, we received a sizable investment from the Dutch government to support our production expansion. That will be key for us to expand our production footprint, continue to serve clients globally, and not just for suppliers or CDMOs like ourselves, but also the funding of innovative startups developing their own medical devices. The ecosystem is fantastic, really exciting, especially in cardiovascular. There's some terrific companies in our neighborhood. One, for example, is Zeltis with really exciting electrospun medical devices in development. Electrospun pulmonic valve, electrospun dialysis graft, electrospun CABG, coronary access bypass graft. So all electrospun devices for cardiovascular. And actually another company by the name of Stentit, who's a client of VIVOLTA's, developing a fully resorbable electrospun vascular graft for peripheral artery disease, will be the first of its kind. And we're hoping that a true breakthrough in the clinic. So there's a lot of exciting things, and I think the Dutch government is doing a fantastic job of supporting innovative companies like ours to make a global impact.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's talk about electrospinning because it's such a unique niche application for cardiovascular and medical technology, which is dominated by, extrusion and cast film or film cast applications, laser cut hypotubes, reflow. I know a little bit about covering stents with lamination and encapsulation. So talk a little bit about medical electrospinning and maybe compared to traditional methods for covering stents. And then I want to talk a little bit about, after that, tunability and scalability.
Great question. Great question, Steve. Indeed, electrospinning is not yet a household name, I would say, and across the medtech industry, but we see a lot of indicators and proof points in cardiovascular medicine, particularly where electrospun products are progressively making more and more impact in the clinic. So while it's not a household name yet, we do certainly believe that it's reaching an inflection point and absolutely going to be making an impact in the clinic. And I think the reasons for that are multifaceted, but to take, for example, the use case of electrospinning as coverings for cardiovascular devices, which is where you see it more and more. You basically have large bore applications and you've got small bore applications, if you'd like to categorize it that way. And for large bore, you can think of prosthetic heart valves like TAVR, but a growing number of mitral and tricuspid valve devices as well. And traditionally, at this moment, these devices require hours and hours of manual suturing to attach a textile like Dacron, for example, to a frame. And it's truly unbelievable that some of these devices incorporate thousands of sutures because they're incredibly complex. And if you actually see one of these devices in your hand, they're like pieces of art, artisanally produced. But we believe that there can be a way to do this better, more cost effective, but also adding more functionality to the device and even improving clinical outcomes, which is, the holy grail. If you can reduce costs, but also bring more value to the clinic and the patient, then it's a clear win. So versus Dacron, for example, that requires a tremendous amount of suturing and manual labor, we're able to actually electrospin meshes, polymeric meshes, directly onto the stent frame. And it doesn't matter if the stent is cobalt-chromium or nitinol. We're able to electrospin directly in a robust, durable way that is completely free of sutures. And then all the device manufacturer needs to do is essentially suture on the actual valve leaflets itself, and it can be ready for further downstream assembly. I've got some prototypes in my hands, and you've got some in your box too. What we're able to do is pretty special because we're able to electrospin directly on the inside of these stent frames, which is exactly analogous to the way that they're suturing Dacron to the inside, not to the outside, which you might see elsewhere, but the inside is where the true value is, because then it's a one-to-one substitution. And even with these elastomers that we use, you're able to, if I can get the angle right, you're able to fully crimp it, where essentially because of the wall thickness, and we're able to achieve 50 microns, even less wall thickness, there's essentially no increase in the crimp profile. So from a functional point of view, there's nothing to lose. There's only that to gain in terms of the reduction in costs for manufacturing. And we also see in other examples, devices and trials where the functional advantages of these electrospun skirts are tremendous in promoting endothelialization, reducing thrombosis, and reducing fibrosis downstream, which can limit the durability of these types of devices. So that's versus Dacron. That's on the large bore side. But then transitioning to the small bore side, things like peripheral stents. Essentially, the industry has, for covered stents, they've got one choice. That's ePTFE. If they were to use Dacron, it's not practical because, it's very difficult to suture a 3 millimeter stent, A, and B, it will occlude due to thrombosis in a matter of hours if you were to use Dacron. PTFE is very biocompatible and accepted by the industry, but there the issue is a couple factors, but one factor is the porosity is very, very low for ePTFE. So that really limits cell ingrowth and natural healthy endothelialization through the mesh wall. Whereas we can also electrospin these small bore stents even on the inside directly. So again, this is not a mesh that's been laminated on after. This is directly applied. And with the enhanced porosity that we can introduce, 80-90% porosity by volume, it's the ideal habitat for cells to actually grow in and endothelialize, vascularize, and that's been well proven in literature. So there's the functional advantage of using electrospun meshes instead of ePTFE, but there's also the process and supply chain advantage, because we all know that there's tremendous regulatory pressure to reduce and eliminate these types of fluorinated polymers, these PFAS, these forever materials. So we're specializing in elastomers that don't include these types of PFAS, and therefore there's a lot of interest from our clients to test these out side by side, and eventually substitute to ePTFE alternatives.
Very interesting. We had a lad from MetaBrain on the podcast one time. I'm not sure if you know a lad, but he talked a little.
I know him well. I know him.
Okay, great guy. He was talking about the cycle times, or the amount of time and labor for suturing, for the sewing process, and how it's hard to get people that want to do that, longer than 6 months. And the yields aren't spectacular either, right? So I can see, understand and appreciate the benefits of directly electrospinning onto the frame. Can you share a little bit about the challenges associated with adhesion or bonding these different materials on the inner or outer or both with, nitinol and stainless steel and cobalt-chromium, some of the materials that are used for scaffolds and frames?
It's a great question, Steve. Of course, it's one thing to make a beautiful electrospun mesh, but it's a completely different thing to apply it in a mechanically robust way that can survive the function, the intended use of the device. And, for these transcatheter heart valves, for example, they have to be crimped to only a few millimeters in diameter. So you can imagine if you crimp such a device and the lamination of the mesh onto the frame is not sufficient, the mesh will simply delaminate. And it's doubly challenging to actually get sufficient adhesion on the inside only. And we haven't seen in the marketplace actually any other examples of inner only lamination of electrospun meshes. And we have identified probably a cause of that that nobody has solved the challenge of adhering the mesh to the frame in a robust way. So we invested very heavily into the material science, into the process technology of how to get a bond. We've actually developed proprietary pre and post treatment processes to the stent frames, and these can be applied readily to nitinol, cobalt-chromium. These processes don't affect the mechanics of the stent frames, which is very important. They don't degrade the metals or compromise the susceptibility to oxidation and other biological processes. And the net result is that we're able to produce these inner-only coverings, which are extremely relevant. Otherwise, you have to fully encapsulate, and you can imagine that adds a lot of crimp profile. Whereas if you can do only one layer, then you can crimp all the way down with minimal, if any, increase to the crimp profile. And right now, these prototypes and early phase products that we're co-developing can survive dozens of crimp expansion cycles, sheathing, delivery, and simulated use. So that's giving the market confidence in working with us moving forward into future phases of co-development to see how this performs in different functional tests like accelerated wear and other things that would be required for eventual market adoption.
Excellent. When we talk about crimping, just for the audience to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong here, these are mainly self-expanding stents that are crimped and loaded into a sheath and then deployed and expanded. Is that kind of what? So the crimping force within a sheath, if it's too high, it'll be difficult to load. It could get kind of hung up, and the surgeon, when the surgeon deploys it or delivers it. Am I correct there?
That's right. Yeah. So there are two major groups of materials. Obviously, there are the self-expanding products, and there are the balloon expandable products. So indeed, the self-expanding based on nitinol, and the balloon expandable based on other metals like cobalt-chromium, even stainless steel, but they all need to be crimped, indeed. And so that crimping is extremely aggressive, you can imagine, to the covering. And that's what makes Dacron a great solution, because polyester is super strong, super tough, and then you suture it so it doesn't go anywhere. And that has been a major challenge of producing an electrospun alternative to be able to survive that crimping, because they can go from 29 millimeters diameter down to 3 millimeters, give or take, 12 French, 3-4 millimeters in diameter. So you can imagine the forces there, but then also to push it through the delivery system introduces a tremendous amount of shear friction. So it has to be low friction, low profile, highly durable, and very strongly bonded to the frame. And that has not been a small engineering feat to solve, but I'm proud to say that VIVOLTA has made tremendous headway there in internal investment in our proprietary IP.
Okay, thanks for that. Talk a little bit as it relates to that about scalability and tunability. Tunability and scalability.
Yeah, great question. So on the tunability side, it's a powerful technology, unlike EPTFE lamination or Dacron sewing, depending on which applications you're thinking of. Because with electrospinning, we can actually combine polymers in different unique ways, and we can change the architecture of the mesh in additional unique ways. So I'll give you an example. For a heart valve, it can be advantageous on one side of the covering to encourage vascular sealing and coagulation, but on the other side, it can be advantageous to reduce the sealing, to reduce coagulation. With electrospinning, we can use different polymers and different architectures. So, on one side of the covering, we can actually electrospin a low thrombogenic material with proven biocompatibility and maybe a very dense architecture to avoid coagulation. But on the other surface, we can create a highly coagulative material with very large pores, and we can do that all in line. So without lamination of different sheets or different layers, we can actually do that in one inline process by changing the electrospinning parameters in real time on a single product. So that's very powerful. And as I alluded to, being able to change the fiber size and the pore size, even independently with some of our newest innovations, we can create barriers to cells on one surface, but on the other surface, actually provide, large pores for vascularization and cell ingrowth. And those are things that are completely unachievable with, or at least, and certainly unscalable with other alternative traditional methods like textiles and EPTFE. So that's on the tunability. There's also the aspect even of polymer selection. In many ways we're agnostic. We're not tied to a certain polymer. We can use resorbable polymers on one surface and non-resorbable on another, depending on the intended use. And you see examples in the marketplace, medical device manufacturers loading drugs into electrospun meshes that are resorbable and then elute the drugs over time. So there's a lot of functional design space that engineers and we alike can enjoy because of this, this flexible platform. And then on the scalability, that's very important. To be able to scalably produce this is obviously essential for the price point, the cost efficacy. Where we are unique in the marketplace is having developed and pioneered fully automated production systems. You can imagine now where we're headed is actually kind of a conveyor belt or a assembly line, if you like, of electrospun products moving left to right through a fully automated electrospinning system so that we can produce hundreds of units a day on a single manufacturing platform. So you take, the current status of taking a day and a half for a single operator to suture a valve, then to potentially being able to produce dozens or even hundreds of laminated valves or electrospun valves in a singular manufacturing system. It can make a huge difference in the future of the industry.
Compelling. So kind of what I'm hearing is you could create laminates or multi-layer structures of different materials simultaneously. And then you can also kind of have coarse or fine structures combined. That's
right.
Okay.
That's right. And then resorbable and unresorbable as well. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of degrees of freedom if you think about it from a design space point of view.
Very interesting. Very, very compelling as well from a scalability standpoint. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really, I think that the huge unmet need here to know, because experts in the art, biomaterials scientists, they're not surprised with the flexibility per se of the platform. But I think what is new and what's worth recognizing is companies like ours are now able to scalably manufacture it. That's really been the critical gap, I would say, the Achilles heel, because it's nice to have flexibility, tunability on a couple prototypes. That's neat. But it doesn't move the needle for your blue chip multinational companies. They need to see that tunability, hundreds of thousands of units per year, and it literally is impossible to do unless you have a fully automated system with inline quality systems to completely eliminate the operator influence and reduce the labor so that it's cost effective.
Excellent. Very cool.
Thanks.
And you mentioned earlier about some of the companies in Europe, that even some of them that you work with and that ecosystem. Are there any examples or case studies you might want to share of either kind of the smaller peripheral or the TAVR type application, whatever it might be, that would be interesting to share if you're allowed to?
No, absolutely, Steve. There are a lot of great examples in the marketplace and also in clinical trials of electrospun products. One great example for coronary applications is the PK Papyrus by Biotronic. This is actually a coronary artery stent for coronary artery perforations. And this comprises an electrospun PU mesh. This is public information, but the advantage of that PU mesh laminated over the stent is that it can seal much more effectively compared to other less porous materials, for example, like EPTFE, presumably. So that's pretty exciting, and that is market approved. That's
polyurethane. You said PU polyurethane. Okay,
that's right. So
elastomeric. So for sealing. Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
sorry to interrupt you. Right. Oh, not at all. No, you're absolutely right. Another great example, also for coronary applications, now in early clinical trials, is from a company by the name of nitinol. They're based in Israel with global distribution partners. Nitinol has a very exciting product called the Ioneer, now in early clinical phase, which actually comprises an electrospun drug-eluting bioabsorbable layer. So it's electrospun, it's bioabsorbable, and it contains an anti-proliferative API, basically to prevent restenosis of the stent and increase the patency. It's very exciting to see how that product proceeds in clinical trials. And then for transcatheter heart valves, which is obviously a hot market segment, has been for some years, some very exciting startups and scale-ups now in clinical phase or entering clinical phase. One by the name of Straight Access Technologies, located in South Africa. They actually have a fully polymeric transcatheter heart valve now entering clinical phase. So no more bovine leaflets, bovine porcine leaflets, fully polymeric. And in their case, the sealing skirt and the main skirt of the stent is electrospun polyurethane, fully electrospun. And the results that they're publishing are absolutely amazing, showing the endothelialization through the electrospun mesh, which, according to the investigators and authors, far outperforms existing standards like Dacron and ePTFE. The authors actually specifically say that in their article, which is fun. Another company by the name of Foldax, located in the US, incorporates an electrospun component into their transcatheter valve under development, proceeding into clinical trials hopefully soon. So yeah, you absolutely see from these innovative companies in particular, folks pushing the boundaries of what can be done and utilizing advanced manufacturing techniques like electrospinning. And we'll be there to support them, hopefully when they're ready to scale as a partner, to be able to scalably manufacture these types of products.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing some of those applications. It's always good to talk about the technology and how it's applied, and those are novel applications from world-class medical device OEMs as well. So very interesting. Right. Oh, this has been so fascinating to learn about electrospinning for cardiovascular applications and the tunability and scalability. And this was a really great conversation. I appreciate you having you on today.
Our sincere pleasure. Thanks so much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to MedX, the Medical Extrusion Podcast, presented by US Extruders. Please subscribe to make sure you're getting the latest episodes. For video episodes, go to us-extruders.com/podcasts. All links are available in the show notes.